how one does even begin to write something like this? Which words to choose in order to describe it? Even listening to the game music while I'm pushing a key after key on my computer keyboard makes me feel like it's an impossible task. But to the task. Playing video games for over 30 years teach me that every one of them is to be played and experienced, but how much of it is the play, and how much is experience itself, depends on the game. I know it maybe doesn't make much sense now, but let me tell you about the title at hand, and with a little luck you will know what I mean by the end of it. I played the first Kingdom Come Deliverance for about 10 to 15 hours because I was really interested in the story, but the controls, feeling of movement and combat were just bad enough to the point where I could not justify playing the game anymore. It was an early version, mind you, and now, having the game patched for over 6 years, it is tempting to try it again. In the end, I decided to play the second one in the series first, as I heard many voices calling it a favorite to the Game of the Year award. Let's see if it's truly the case. Judging by the fact the notes alone for this review are longer than most of the finished ones, I already know the answer. Would you like to know it too? Come closer and listen to old fellow gamer. The story of the game, where to begin? Maybe unlike the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, we'll start from the beginning, which is, interestingly enough, just right after the ending of previous entry in the series. The game starts quite different than the first one, yet very similar. Henry just can't catch a break. Ah yes, I almost forgot. Henry is our protagonist, which we embody in this title, at least most of the time. Simple messenger quest goes sideways very fast and we are on our own to survive and thrive in this cruel world of early 15th century Bohemia. Same as always, I will not tell you about most of the events in the story, so you can experience it for yourself, as it is the main reason to play this game. I will only mention some of them when and where absolutely necessary. Anyways, in KCD2 we have a mix of political intrigue, social whirlwinds and times of war and brigandry, as well as romance and gosh oh gosh, I guess everything else in between. The storytelling here is very rich and goes several extra miles compared to your average, run-of-the-mill story-driven game. And I do not throw these words on the wind here. It's like reading a very long book or a series of books. And the crazy thing is that when you are over 100 hours into the game, you learn that it's been only a few months since the whole thing began at the start of the first title in the series. Bloody hell, some people might say it drags its legs and overwelcome its stay, but I must strongly disagree with that sentiment. It is this elongated sequence of events that makes it feel real and visceral. I felt the pain and exhaustion alongside the people on my computer screen. It was unlike the other games that I played in recent memory. The main story in this game will exhaust you, and you will love it. Okay, that's fine and dandy, but what about the side content we love so much in RPGs? I hear you say. Well, even though there is a plethora of side quests, missions, tasks, activities, call them as you like, it all felt like a part of main story because it was still Henry's story, even if he was just taking part in other people's tales. Wait, I keep saying people instead of characters and NPCs. I guess I got immersed deeply into the game world. That's a very good sign. Still, I must admit, Henry digs suspicious amounts of graves on his journey. Some of the side quests, missions and tasks are similar quality to the main story ones, but unfortunately not all of them. If that was the case, we would have the best game ever on our hands. I strongly recommend doing as much of the main story quests in a row as you can, but only after doing all the side activities if you wanna see it all. Or if you do not, only the mandatory ones and get straight into the long chain of main missions again. The main story is the biggest and most satiating course meal here, and unlike some other RPGs, the side content here cannot hold a candle to it in terms of cinematic quality, storytelling and the atmosphere. All the side plots, adventures, problems of local folks, romances and all the other stuff is great, but I was more interested in characters that make those stories inside the game world, which, by the way, might be just the most realistic game setting that we ever had a pleasure to witness. Let me start by saying that Henry is great as a protagonist. He is likable and elastic enough so people can get enough of different playthroughs, even if in the end the story ends all the same. We also got Hans Capon, which is written and acted fantastically. He is just what you would imagine he was like if you read a book instead of playing the game of the same title. Overall, the actors in this game do a fantastic job. Without them it all would not be possible, so brava! We cannot forget about Godwin, which is the second playable character. He takes way less of a game time than Henry and you control him only in the main story, but still, he is a welcome addition as he is very different from our hero Henry. That sounds like a title of a song. From more prominent side characters we also have legendary Jan Ziska, hero of the Czech people, the general that never lost a battle. It is a shame we didn't see any of his Modern Warfare battle tactics, but these were used in later years. But here is not the place and time to talk about it, as it is a river of a topic, and I encourage you to watch some historical YouTube videos about him. It's an amazing stuff. Anyways, there is so many wonderful side characters and I simply cannot talk about all of them as this review will be too long as it is, so I'll just tell you about a few of them to entice you to get into the game yourselves. There is one distinct Polish warrior in the mix. He is written with humor and balls. I really appreciated it that he only speaks in Polish, so most people cannot understand him. I was laughing my arse off as Polish is my first language. Adding to him his Hungarian friend, this duo of deadly clowns is the comic relief of the game. I must warn you, it is all done in not so good taste as it is brutal and vulgar oftentimes. Overall, when I think about it now, the whole game is not for the faint of heart, as it quite realistically depicts the brutality of a time period in the presented fragment of Bohemian Kingdom. This is yet another time when I didn't expect it, as I thought I didn't like any of our band's comrades that much. But during the scene where one of them was dying whilst making his last imperfect confession combined with prayer, it hit me hard with a flow of emotions. The game really made me feel that loss, and what happened later awakened my hatred towards another character. In that moment I realized that this is one of the best stories ever written in video game history. Despite of all of its shortcomings, which as it occurs are not that important as that what we feel during and after it is told. But man oh man, how it is told. Cutscenes are so good here that I cannot find the words to describe it. Or can I? The combination of motion capture, realistic visuals, great music and voice acting, it just makes you feel like this is the best thing you've ever experienced. When you are in those moments. I haven't felt like this for ages. It felt like experiencing greatness, true cinema. And the humor in some cutscenes is just splendid. I almost pissed myself several times laughing. But let's be serious for just a moment. Very important thing is to talk about the game's favor towards the truth and historical accuracy when possible. In my mind it is very similar in style to the Polish trilogy by Henryk Sienkiewicz, composed of 3 books, with Fire and Sword, The Deluge and Mr. Wołodyjowski. It has some made-up characters to color up the events and make it more interesting to read, but still, all the historical events and characters known from history books are described pretty accurately. Moreover, in both cases authors do not avoid hard topics like the brutality of combat, purges of Jewish communities in times of war and uncertainty, and many others that would take me quite a while to list. The point is, we need this kind of creative endeavors, which besides telling us entertaining stories also tell us the truth, no matter how ugly it is. And yes, I know some events in both cases were described in a wrong time frame, out of order and quite differently from the historical records. It was done as a part of creative freedom, and I'm not going to speculate about the obvious or hidden motives, as it is not of importance nor consequence to me. Of course, I wish it was all historically accurate so people didn't need to delve into the factual sources elsewhere, but we cannot have everything, can we? It is still a fictional story based on historical events and characters, not an academic history lesson. Still, overall writing quality is much higher than in most games. It has some old charm to it, but it is not flawless. I am well aware of that. Sometimes one character calls another by the name, even though they never learn it. Minor mistake, but still noticeable for anyone who pays attention to what characters in the game are saying. At this point I think this is just unavoidable in the long RPG games like this one. The best thing about the writing and stories included is that writers do not take their own screenplay too serious or too lightly, and there's just enough humor and grief consequences that it balances itself perfectly with a just right tone, which is hard as hell. Caps off to the writing team, well done indeed. Actually, I find the writing and writers damn smart. They play on words masterfully so we can pray for the devil and hear dozens and dozens of great wordplays like that. Many of them are not very subtle, but that's to the game's advantage because more people can catch them on the fly or when they think about it for a while. I know, I am well aware that writing here isn't perfect, as writers made a grievous mistake. First, I need to explain that there is a choice to be made in storytelling. You can make as little repetitions in the dialogues as possible, focusing on the audience pleasure while reading or listening to the presented material. Or you can choose more realism to the fictional world by making characters repeat very similar lines to different people, so they convey the information in somewhat realistic manner. I am on the side of making the story better for the audience, so I would minimize repetition to the absolute minimum, as you cannot eliminate logical errors completely anyways, so let it be a little bit more pleasant. I consider many dialogues in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 unnecessarily repetitive and annoying. Many scenes lose plenty of momentum because of that reason alone, so the cutscenes are even further away in quality from the dialogue scenes. That's a real shame, but it is what it is, which is a sentence that I repeat too often myself. Irony intended. As I said before, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a game, not a book, so we need to talk about the gameplay as well. And thank goodness the second game is way better to control than its cumbersome predecessor. Praise the Lord! I will really need to come back to the first title and test it myself. Again. To be frank and honest, we could do with fewer keybinds. I was sick and tired of looking to lower right corner for a hint which key to press or hold in any given situation. Yes, after like 20 hours I memorized all the actions, but still, it's kinda a little bit too much at the early game, when ideally you would like to have as much fun as possible and immerse yourself into the beautiful game world, instead of checking out which key to press or hold. Thankfully, melee combat is a very improved version from the first game. Now I actually understand how to play it. Moreover, it is now very enjoyable. However, it's very hard to win fights at the beginning of the game, so you will need to be patient. Both you and Henry will need to get skilled in combat and you're gonna need to acquire better equipment as well. Later on it's much easier and better, although it is not as fluid and fun as in Mordhau or Chivalry, games which are the best when it comes to first-person melee combat. I guess in KCD2 the fencing realism took precedence over fun, but that's okay as it is still good enough and just different. I enjoyed it for what it is. But combat is only a part of gameplay in this complex and huge game. Outside of it, we got plenty of elements that need to be understood and utilized in order to succeed in this cruel world of medieval Bohemia. You need to be very careful about the decisions you make. If you barely survive an encounter early in the game, you most likely need to travel very far to get to your bed in order to heal the wounds. I made that mistake myself and I paid dearly. I felt like Leonardo DiCaprio in Revenant very often in first couple dozen of hours. It can be very unnerving, but the reward for that is the feeling of dangerous adventure while playing every single session up to the point. It was great and awful at the same time. I don't know, it just felt like a real struggle, and I was so satisfied when I finally became a Terminator on the battlefield, no matter the size of a battle. I was simply unstoppable. For people who are clever and smart, after the first hurdles, game will be quite easy, when equipped with good gear and leveled up Henry. But many people will struggle endlessly as they will not be able to cleverly use game mechanics in order to beat it. Many players will get stuck and uninstall the game, but still, I would not change a thing about it. It is what it's supposed to be. I am not a fan of stealth system in this game. I know they went for a more realistic approach, but it was tiresome to sneak correctly early on. Lockpicking is very slow to progress too, and it's easy to make a mistake that will cost you dearly, considering save system that is used in this title. Stealing items is very hard at the beginning and oftentimes you are forced into it in order to complete some quests. The whole training of stealth and thievery before going for a Miller quest was tedious as all hell, but as almost everything in this game, as you level up your skills and get powerful perks, is getting easier in the end, and the satisfaction gain in the process makes it all worth it in my mind. Sneaking around in full armor was fun as hell in endgame. If you play this game, you're going to spend a lot of time in dialogue windows, so we need to treat it like an important gameplay element, as it is just that indeed. You cannot talk with all NPCs, which is a shame compared to the recently played Oblivion remaster, but considering the quality of many lines there, maybe it's not such a bad thing. I was just disappointed that I could not trade with every trader, as some of them in the city of Kuttenberg were just decorations and not active NPCs. Sometimes dialogue lines from characters don't make the most of sense. And it shows how the whole thing was constructed. It is the known problem with many elastic dialogue paths and branches in RPGs such as this one. You can give players many options, but it will cost you in cohesion. There is no way around it. Still, I consider the dialogue gameplay very fine and interesting more often than not. But you're not gonna talk yourself out of hard work, oh no. Henry was born as a working class hero, so you're gonna need to do some labor alongside with him. Bloody hell, I was shocked when I learned that in order to make potions, you really need to do all the work and not just press a button to craft them. What a surprise. I didn't enjoy it very much, but I could appreciate it for what it is, and I guess many folks gonna have fun with that, as the popularity of simulator games has shown. Blacksmithing is very much the same, but I enjoy it way more. I don't know, it's something about the working with hot metal that is enticing for me. All the sparks and hammering. It's a very manly craft. Besides, my grandfather was a blacksmith, so it is sentimental for me as well. And there is one perk that makes weapons that you craft yourself the best in the game, so there's that. Well, at least designers had a little mercy on us, so the cooking and drying of food and herbs is instant and not manual labor. And there is of course before mentioned trading. Merchants will buy and sell only the items that are logically sound for their specialization, so you cannot go around selling your loot to anyone and everyone. At the end of the game I had over 500 pounds of unsold weapons and armor in my horse's bags, while I was swimming in groschen myself. When trading with merchants, there is haggling minigame which sucks when you realize how to game it every time to your advantage, so it makes the whole process boring. Real shame, as there was some potential in that mechanic. Still, my main gripe with the whole trading system was same as always. Difference between selling and buying price is too large as it is in most games. I always found this concept ridiculous and ruinous of merchant fantasy in those games. I would rather have limited loot and price differences closer to what we can experience in real life. Okay, since this is an RPG game, there are some character progression systems, as one could imagine. So, as in most games in this genre, your character, in this case Henry, can progress in two ways: by improving himself from getting experience and training, which will improve his abilities and statistics, and from acquiring better gear. In case of former, there is leveling up similar to the Elder Scrolls game series. You use a skill in order to improve it, or you can pay a trainer to quicken the process, but be careful, it is not cheap and does not give as much as we are used to in other games, so use your groschen wisely while you are not a rich page yet. In case of equipment, you can craft, buy or loot weapons. Unfortunately, in base game you cannot craft armor. In the newest blacksmithing DLC you can, but I didn't bother to buy it as I was finishing the game anyways, and I have very limited time nowadays, so I am more interested in experiencing another title instead of dwelling too long even on the best of them. This time around I need to put locations into the gameplay section of this review, because they are an integral and very important part of KCD2. Bloody hell, this game looks the most similar to real world from any video game that I played. When you go through the forests, you actually feel like going through the forests. I know, what a crazy concept. Sometimes navigating through forests, ravines and bodies of water can be hard, just like in real life, especially when going through the dark forest at night with a torch in your hand. That's quite an experience when wolves and wild dogs can jump you at any moment. It's been ages since I felt like this in any game. It goes away later in the endgame, but still I'm thankful that it was there in the first place. I heard several people praising Kuttenberg, but to be completely frank, I didn't enjoy it. The reason is simple: I myself live and work in a town of around 10,000, and I know it was considered a very big city back at the beginning of 15th century, but that's not what I mean. What I'm really trying to say is that I enjoyed more all of the villages, forts, castles, fields and forests. This is what I loved, and urban life is what I live and breathe every day, even if it's over 600 years later. I reckon not that much has changed despite what you might conclude on the first glance. There were too many quests in Kuttenberg, so for many hours I felt trapped in there, when I just wanted to run free. I really think if they moved some of the content from there, the game would be more enjoyable in that part of it, but that's just my 2 groschen thrown in. Before we go into the technical details, considering this title, I would like to discuss some more aspects of the gameplay that are quite important. The game starts very slowly with the gameplay elements themselves. It's heavily story-driven and consists mostly of cutscenes in the first several hours, which can deter many players from diving into the world of medieval Bohemia. And there is still that bloody system where you need a special drink item in your inventory called Save Your Schnapps, funnily enough, in order to save the game. At least devs gave us option to save and quit, for which I am grateful as my gaming sessions are not that long nowadays. Anyways, I still downloaded mods for quick saving the game, not for save scamming, but for entirely different reason. The game doesn't do a good job at letting you know which beds you can sleep in without causing you to be a criminal, and other activities are similar. When in doubt, I quick saved to save time, because some of the save files can be 20 minutes in the past or even more. Still, after I learned the game mechanics decently enough to know what I'm doing, I uninstalled the quick save mod and only used Save Your Schnapps and other legit game mechanics. If you want to live a dangerous life, I encourage you to not install the quick save mod, as it robbed me from some consequences I could enjoy or hate in the process. Oh well, nothing is free, as they say. And you better get used to solid dose of realism injected into the game, because you're not gonna see all that much at night and you won't be able to do much of anything, while most other people sleep or stand guard on properties. You better go and sleep at night yourself, but if you slept long enough during the day for some reason, you can use weight mechanic or just wander around the wilderness like me and search for some treasures and do other minor objectives. Still, going through the dark wilds is not the most convenient thing in the world. Funny thing, even though I am not a fan of gambling in real life, I really enjoyed to play some dice from time to time. It was just fun and I didn't even mind to lose some groschen, as at the same time my agility was leveling a little bit. Still, even in main storyline, you need to be ready for some long gameplay sections where you do some not very interesting tasks in the name of realism. Even the siege is composed mainly from checking things out and talking with people. You will need patience with this game. You're gonna go through some sections grading your teeth, same as characters presented on the screen. It's painful yet awesome at the same time. Another thing is that the game forces you to be a sneaky beaver, a warrior and an orator. And there is no escaping that. You simply need to be doing all those things, so you cannot be one-trick pony like in many other RPGs. I could talk about the gameplay of Kingdom Come Deliverance for hours, but who would listen to that? I think I conveyed the most important things that I wanted to, so let's dive into the technical aspects of this production. Starting with what I can see. Visually, game is very pleasing. It does a good job of portraying the game world and characters in a convincing way. Actually, this game has the most realistic looking countryside and forests out of any game ever made, as I write this down in August of 2025. Moreover, this is yet another game that uses FSR4 in a very effective way. It is nice to see that in more and more titles. You have a choice between native anti-aliasing with FSR, which is way better than alternative of SMMA variation found here, or you can use upscaling for massive gains, as on quality setting it gave almost 50% more performance than a native resolution, and it's not even like it's worse in every aspect. While native FSR is clearly sharper, it is surprisingly shows a little bit more aliasing, which quality mode is more smooth around some edges, but has less overall clarity. It is, of course, in pretty much static scenes, and in motion there is a little difference that I can actually observe, so of course I will take the higher frame rates every day of the week. There is slight but noticeable color bending when observing the skybox. One of the newest patches brought HDR option on PC, but the game was clearly mastered in SDR, so it is an obvious choice and yet another lose for HDR enjoyers on PC. I haven't tried Auto HDR since I recently quote-unquote upgraded to Windows 11, as Microsoft is dropping support for Windows 10 soon. But Auto HDR looked horrible in KCD2, so I stuck to SDR all day every day. The engine does really good job with visuals, but there are some flaws as well, like objects occluding water reflections and casting very unrealistic shadows on that surface. Rain screen effect is not of the best as well, especially at nighttime. Still, it is very good to see a game not made in Unreal Engine. Clearly, CryEngine is not yet obsolete and can output great results if used correctly. Strangely enough, I suspect that the game has two sets of character models, one for gameplay and dialogue scenes and the other higher quality for cutscenes rendered in game engine. I do not know why, as it seems the cutscenes have higher frames per second. I guess most of the game engine functions are suspended during the cutscene time, so it can put as much resources to just render them the best it can. This is not a new thing by any means, but in this title it is quite noticeable, and I played the game on the mix of high and ultra settings. Before mentioned character models are not so far in quality, or maybe they're even the same under closer inspection. Maybe just the baked-in light and shadows in the cutscenes, which are way better when you observe the transition, and additional animations, especially the facial animations, that were motion captured in high fidelity, made me believe that these were different models. Who knows, as I cannot clearly decide one way or another, but one thing is sure. These cutscenes rendered in game engine in real time are of top-notch quality and I could watch them for days, let me tell you that much. But coming back to the dialogue scenes, there is another small problem with them. Sometimes camera is set in the wrong place, so you see back of a chair or torso of a character, or any other obstacle instead of the face of the one that is speaking. As I mentioned, the game runs on heavily customized CryEngine. It looks and feels way different than your run-of-the-mill Unreal Engine game. It is a breath of fresh air. Also, someone had a good idea to make so many graphical presets, so almost anyone can set the game easily to their needs. In most games you need to play with custom settings, but here I found that there is not much benefit to it. Presets are just that competently made, which is rare. You can play almost on potato on lowest setting, while for people with high-end rigs and for players in the future, there is the highest set of settings in preset called experimental. I settled down to play on mix of high-end ultra with FSR upscaling set to quality. I am kinda maniac when it comes to optimizing game settings, so I could not leave it on preset, even when I really tried to not obsess over it. Well, there are some battles that one cannot win easily. Additionally, in this game AMD Fluid Frames works way better than in Oblivion Remastered. I guess it's because there is almost no stutters and frame times are really tight. Very nice to see and feel such a thing. But visuals and performance is not all that makes the game. Oftentimes I find myself keeping closer and closer attention to the sound of the game, as it is an area where I have yet much to learn. I am happy to report that on this front KCD2 looks good as well. Sound effects are great and immersive. Maybe they are not the best I have ever witnessed in my gaming years, but still on a very high level. Voice acting is top-notch, although the ordinary responses by some NPCs are in common voice and not their actor's voice, which can be immersion breaking in some cases. I hold it against developers because they cared about so many details and this flaw could be easily avoided if thought of or cared about in proper manner. Moreover, sometimes the mix of dialogue line can be misplaced, meaning it is placed in the wrong soundstage. Example, you are facing the person that is talking straight on, like half a meter away, and he or she sounds like they are behind a wall. It is not very often, but still somewhat annoying to witness. When I think more about it, some characters had inadequate voice actors chosen for the way their physique is presented. I'm not gonna give any examples as I don't wanna put shade on anyone's work, as I think everyone involved did a fantastic job. There is not many of those mismatches, but nonetheless it bothered me a little bit. Music can be epic or soothing, depending on occasion, but no matter the mood, it is very good and fitting. I could not imagine this game with any other soundtrack. Someone had a great vision for this music design. I would like to also point out that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is thought through so good that even a loading screen is interesting as it contains at the same time great music, beautiful visual art that resemble old paintings with wide brush strokes, and even some tips and tricks which are very useful to the beginner player. This is great and I know it is nothing new, as we had this kind of stuff since early 2000s, but still I appreciate it a great deal. But the game ain't perfect by any means, as nothing really is. In the very first hour I had to download mod in order to unlock the horrendous 30 FPS cutscenes. I keep asking myself, why do developers do such a horrendous thing to us players? I would understand it if it fell apart in unlocked mode, or even locked one with higher frames per second, but no, the between 200 and 400 frames per second worked perfectly well, and it was buttery smooth feast for my old tired eyes. I strongly encourage developers to not lock in-game engine cutscenes to low framerate values. It should be a crime by this point. I am only joking, but I am not laughing, mind you. Strange thing, but several times I was punished for the crimes I didn't commit. Maybe I was mistaken and killed 2 innocent people. Maybe game registered bandits as peasants. I have no idea. All I know is that I ended up with a criminal brand on my neck, as I needed to talk to one of NPCs for a crucial quest, yet I had not enough groschen to bail myself out, nor the required speech to skillfully and eloquently dig myself out of this unfortunate shebang. Well, the bug ended up to be a part of Henry's history, unfairly sentenced for the crimes he didn't commit. Oh, the cruel world. The worst glitch of all was the one that made the loading screen infinite and not load anything from the disk at all. Strangely enough, turning off upscaling and anti-aliasing helped to resolve it. Don't worry, you can turn them back on just as you save the game after the part where the bug occurred. It fortunately happened only once, to never come back. And as it is often the case in very long single-player games like this one, the further you are, the more bugs and glitches accumulate to raise their ugly heads. I can see Warhorse Studios doing good job in patching those, so I would not worry too much about that. Other than that, there are some minor graphical glitches which most people will not even notice, I would presume, as I myself could barely catch them in action. Game took me between 122 and 147 hours, where first number comes from the save game files and the second from AMD Adrenaline software. Still, it is one of the longest single-player games that I have ever played, but it is partially because of my playstyle, slow and getting into any dialogue I can wherever I can. I guess the older I am, the longer it will take me to finish games that I play. But enough about me, as all of you who are still listening want to know one thing most of all. Do I recommend this game? And if you didn't fall asleep while watching and or listening to this review, you surely know the answers to this question by now. Hell yeah, I recommend it. I will state even more than that. If I could play only one single player game this year, and I had to pick, I would surely pick Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, no doubt about that. The game is brilliant in the sense that it reminds me of good old games, but using modern technologies. It represents all that I cherish in this space of ours. It has interesting story with characters which actually feel like people and not some NPC mannequins. Gameplay which is deep and intricate, but still fun, engaging and rewarding. It looks and sounds great, so we can actually feel like we live in the game world, and we have adventures ourselves, through the eyes of Henry and his companions. This is just amazing, as I thought and feared that I would not experience anything like that ever again, but here we are. The most important thing was that this game made me do my day job faster, so I could go home just a little bit earlier to play some more. It has been ages since I was so eager to play the game, and it felt great. Like I was alive again. It is the closest thing to the trilogy of Henryk Sienkiewicz in form of video game, and those 3 books are my favorite of all time. They were truly written to lift up hearts. I'm glad that our Czech brothers have a title like this, and I hope that we will get something similar in the future, because the closest thing we have now is the Witcher series, which is a fantasy and not grounded story around historical and important events from our past. I truly think this is important to include real history in entertainment productions, as it is a gateway for young people to take interest in the history, which is important so they can learn from it and try to make this world better. Finishing this one made me reinstall the first game and give it another try in the future when the stars align, and I will draw the number of it from all the games that I have on my waiting to play list, which is getting bigger and bigger every month, sitting at the moment at over 50 positions. I don't think I will have time in this life to experience all I want to, but I am glad I could experience Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So maybe now intro to this review makes more sense to you. If not, well, I'm glad that you could stay with me and listen to the very end. God be with you, and I will meet you in another great late review. To the task!